Hi, I'm David Smith, and welcome to the Milestone Club. This is a club for entrepreneurs and anyone involved in driving a technology startup towards success. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to the Milestone Club, explain how it came about, and then I'm going to ask you 5 questions to assess your knowledge and your chance of navigating your startup toward a profitable exit. Now, the vast majority of startups will fail. Something north of 9 out of 10 will fail. And actually, they'll fail for reasons that are very predictable. Reasons that could be avoided if the entrepreneurs and the people navigating the startup company were aware of the pitfalls and were able to avoid them. Now, this club is designed to help active entrepreneurs get their startups on track, start hitting their milestones, and generating momentum in the marketplace. This has been a kind of lifelong project for me. I saw my dad struggling as an entrepreneur because he didn't have the education and the knowledge to grow a business beyond a certain size. So I decided to go off to university and basically went off on a quest to figure out what it takes to build a successful startup business. Before I went off to college, I actually studied accounting, which was useful, and later on I actually sold and designed accounting systems, so that was the financial aspect was quite useful. At university, I studied computer science and economics because I wanted to be involved in tech and in business, and yeah, it was useful, but I left university, formed my first tech startup company, and when I got into it, I thought, whoa, hold it a minute, wait a minute. I don't have enough knowledge and information to do this. So I went back to business school in the evenings. And in the evenings at business school, I was the only one there that was in a startup company. Everyone else was working for large corporations. And I found that everything they taught us at business school was about large corporations. I mean, they assumed that you had a product. They assumed that you had a marketing budget. And, you know, in a startup business, when you start out, you don't have any of those things. There was absolutely nothing at business school to help me figure out how to form the right type of company, how to get it off the ground, how to bootstrap, all those types of things. So business school, I learned at business school actually a lot about marketing. And then the only time I've not actually been focused on being an entrepreneur, I joined Apple. And I moved into the marketing department, and I actually got promoted to be Apple World's marketing manager, head of, responsible for Apple's global brand image. So I was working with all the countries and all the different Apple subsidiaries to try and synchronize and promote Apple's brand image throughout the world. But then, you know, I am an entrepreneur, and the tug of startup and entrepreneurship led me to leave Apple, and I moved to Silicon Valley. And in Silicon Valley, I formed startup companies, and I learned a lot. You know, I learned a lot from actually running startup companies, raising finance. I raised finance from some of the most famous, largest, wealthiest billionaires in the world. I raised finance from investors in China and Japan, as well as the US, from hundreds of angel investors and so on. So I learned a lot there, but I was a little bit surprised that it's a little bit like the Wild West. There wasn't any kind of documented process. You know, there wasn't anywhere to go where you could learn what you needed to learn to be successful in a startup venture. I actually learned a lot from my lawyer, a guy called Mark White, who I work with and partner with on another venture here we have called Liquidity Club, Liquidity Club is actually designed, it's a club for the startups that have generated momentum and are looking towards an exit in some form of liquidity. And so that's another venture, and this Milestone Club is associated with the Liquidity Club. But anyway, Mark was my lawyer, and he started giving me guidance. Oh, well, when you get here, you do this, and this is how you structure your stock option plan, and all these types of things. And then I realized that the nuts and bolts of business in Silicon Valley are assembled by lawyers. So I found myself going to law school in the evenings. So I went to Santa Clara Law School. I earned my doctorate in law. I was most interested in startups, venture capital, and all those types of things. You learn about preferred stock and common stock, which we will come back to later in this video. And I finished. The other thing I learned about at law school was patents and intellectual property, and I formed a patent trading exchange, or a technology trading exchange, and we became one of the largest and most successful patent brokers in the business. So I've brokered, working on the buy side or on the sell side, the sale of thousands of patents, and I've learned a lot, and we'll come back to that later in this video as well. And then I learned a lot through actually writing this down and authoring books. I authored a book called Zero to IPO, which is a roadmap and travel guide for startup entrepreneurs. Another book called Patents, Cloaks and Daggers, which delves inside the secretive and bizarre patent trade. And another book called Dollar Value, which covers how startups are valued, technology is valued, patents, intellectual property, and all sorts of technology assets are valued. Because the way they're valued in the real world, in Silicon Valley and the tech sector, is not the way they were teaching me at business school, let me tell you that. So all that was useful, and we've pulled all that together into a knowledge base here, and this knowledge base is made available to you in the Milestone Club as part of the benefits of joining the Milestone Club. So anyway, before I go on and ask you those 5 questions, I'm going to explain our methodology, and the methodology which permeates our knowledge base and has proven very successful to us in building successful startups. So your startup's on a journey, and this is the metaphor and the methodology we have here at Silicon Valley Business School. The whole concept is that you need to figure out where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, you don't have much chance of getting there. And if you're going to target selling the company, that's a very different route from, say, an IPO, or if you're just going to build some technology and sell the technology. So you need to make decisions along the way which have very important implications. And actually early on you'll see that you need to make important decisions about how you structure the company and how you form the startup and how you set your milestones based on what your target destination is. So you have a target destination, and then you need to identify the milestones along the way. We do have detailed information on most of the most common milestones that you're going to be looking to achieve as a technology startup company. And we provide you with help to achieve those milestones in the form of information and all sorts of videos and materials. You're probably going to need to gather some funds and provisions for your journey. We deal with that in some detail, and assemble a winning team, gathering the team together. And then after all that, there's no point just having a target destination and a series of milestones leading to that destination and a team and funding. You've got to generate momentum. Momentum is the speed at which you're going to achieve your milestones. Once you start achieving milestones, you start generating momentum, you will see that people are attracted towards you. There's a buzz around the company. Momentum is a magical force when it comes to startup ventures. Doors will open when you start to generate momentum and hit your milestones. Now, you're going to be navigating through treacherous terrain. It is a minefield out there. It's a legal minefield, a financial minefield, and that's why the vast majority of startups fail. More than 9 out of 10 startups will fail, and most of them fail for totally predictable reasons. Reasons that could be avoided if the founders had the knowledge necessary to avoid the pitfalls, hit their milestones, and they knew how to generate positive momentum. So let me ask you a few questions so you can assess your own chances of success. Now, these questions may sound like they're US-centric, but what's happened is Silicon Valley had a very peculiar and specific way of doing business. And what's happened is that style of doing business has been copied and adopted by the technology hubs all over the world. So the chances are, well, I'm going to give you some questions and answers here. The chances are that in your country, the investment and the startup community has adopted exactly the same mode of doing business, the same way the stock is structured, preferred stock, common stock, all those good things. Also, you'll probably find that the legal framework in your country mirrors the United States as well, because basically in the most important areas, the large tech hubs have basically mirrored the legal framework of the United States. So anyway, there will be equivalent procedures likely in your country, but we'll talk in the next slide. We'll have 5 questions and answers about the, we'll be focusing on the US. So let's see how you get along. Okay, so questions. Question number 1. When you start a new venture, do you form an LLC or a corporation? You might want to jot down these answers. We're going to dig in these questions and your answers. We're going to dig in. I'll give you my answers in the subsequent slides. Okay, do you file for S Corp status? This is a preferential tax treatment for small companies in the United States. Do you file patents to protect your inventions? If you do, how much do you budget? What types of patents do you build? When you get an opportunity to present your business to a venture investor at an initial meeting, do you ask them to sign an NDA, confidentiality agreement, to protect your confidential information? That's question number 4. Question number 5 is a scenario. Let's say you are successful in hitting milestones and generating momentum with your startup. And some large company comes along and says, hey, we want to offer you $20 million to buy your company. You have 80% of the shares after selling 20% of the shares to a venture capital investor. So firstly, how do you make the decision to whether you're going to accept this buyout or not? And the second part of the question is, how much do you collect from that purchase price of the shares of the company? So there you are. There are your 5 questions. Jot down your answers, and then I'll go in. I'll give you my answers in the subsequent slide. All right. So the question number 1: do you form an LLC or a corporation? Well, the typical things that a lawyer would consider would be whether you have pass-through taxation. So is the entity going to be taxed at the corporate level, or can the taxable revenue pass through to the individual? And an LLC has tax benefits in that it can be taxed as a partnership where there's no tax at the LLC level. So the LLC doesn't pay its own taxes if you elect to go that way. The tax revenue comes through to you as the owner, and you then pay your taxes as you would normally anyway. So there could be potentially tax benefits to forming an LLC. The other issue typically that's considered is the liability shield. A corporation provides a liability shield, but it's not bulletproof. And an LLC has a liability shield that's a little bit more bulletproof than a corporation. So many inexperienced attorneys and advisors may suggest that you form an LLC. However, that would be the wrong answer. You need to form a corporation because investors will not invest in an LLC. Venture capital investors don't invest in LLCs. They don't understand LLCs. LLCs are some unpredictable creature that they really don't trust at all. So they require you to form a corporation where they feel comfortable with the corporate law. Actually, the vast majority of LLCs will want to invest in a Delaware corporation because they fully understand and trust the way that Delaware corporations operate. So the answer to this question is pretty simple. It's a corporation and it's not an LLC. Question number 2. Do you file for S Corp status? S Corporation status provides pass-through taxation, so it eliminates taxation at the corporate level, which can be very beneficial, and it's actually something that most small businesses take advantage of in the United States. The business has to meet certain criteria in order to file S Corporation status, but IRC 1202, Qualified Small Business Stock, is only available to C Corporation. It's not available to S Corporations. And under IRC 1202, if your company is a C Corporation, then you pay 0 federal income tax when it comes to selling your company or selling the shares in your company. So this could save you millions of dollars when it comes to cashing out with your startup. So the answer to that question is no, you do not file S Corp status. You file for C Corp status, you pay your taxes as a corporation, but then when it comes to selling the company later on, you don't pay any federal taxes to the government in the United States. Question number 3 was about patents, filing patents and how much to budget. I have spent many years, since 2003 actually, brokering patent transactions in the United States and worldwide, selling thousands of patents and handling all sorts of transactions. I have my book, Patents, Cloaks and Daggers, on this topic. The thing to remember about patents, it may sound like a good idea, and the general consensus is that patenting is good for a startup company. But when you look into it, patents are a right to exclude. Patents are merely a right to sue an infringer in court. And weak patents are worthless. 99% of the patents that we see coming to us being offered up for sale are absolutely worthless. They're worth nothing at all because there's nothing you can do with them. Either the patents are not being infringed or they're not built to withstand the challenges they'll face when they're litigated. So you need bulletproof patents. If you're going to invest in patents, you want to invest in bulletproof patents, and this is expensive. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to prosecute. It takes years to build patents. You don't just want 1 or 2 claims, you want hundreds. I have patents that I've sold that have more than 600 claims in the family of several patents. You don't just want 1 patent, you need multiple patents, because if you have a weak patent portfolio, it will easily be killed when it comes to being challenged. So you have to invest heavily in patents. And it takes years to file the patents, and then it takes decades for infringement to develop in the marketplace. So it's a long-term strategy. If you're going to file patents, then you need patent attorneys who are familiar and experienced with litigation, because patents that are weak and are not built for litigation, as I said to you, are worthless, and that's about 99% of the patents. There's only 1 in 1,000 patents ever makes it to court, so bear that in mind. So don't waste your money on weak patents. Really, it's a waste of money. If you're not going to go heavily into patents and it's not part of a long-term strategy, don't waste your money on patents. Question number 4 was about confidentiality agreements, NDAs. Your patent attorney, people may suggest it's a good idea that anyone you present to, you ask them to sign an NDA. So, do you ask a venture capital investor at your first meeting with them to sign an NDA? The answer to that question is no, because they will not sign NDA agreements at initial meetings. It creates too much liability. Imagine you're a venture capital investor and you're seeing several companies a day. Over time, you can't sign NDAs and have all that liability out there. This was what Tim Draper said to me as his explanation. They will not sign NDAs at that first meeting. And if you ask them to sign an NDA, it's a rookie move. It means you don't really know the process, you're not experienced with it. What you need to do is present your business plan without giving away any of the confidential information. If there is secret source, then you don't give it away as part of the pitch in your business plan. If there is secret source and the investors need to know what the recipe is to that, they will want to see that in due diligence when it comes to pre actually funding the investment. They'll have a due diligence process, and at that point you can have them sign an NDA if it's necessary. But generally the answer to that question is no, venture investors will not sign NDAs. Question number 5 was our scenario. You're offered $20 million. You own 80% of the company. The investors own another 20% of the company. Do you accept the $20 million? How do you make the decision whether to accept that $20 million offer? And then how much do you personally collect from that transaction? Well, you don't get $16 million. Let's get that out of the way at the beginning. Because the investors have, and the investors also have a veto right to block the sale of the company. So you don't have, ultimately, you don't have a say in whether the company's sold or not, because the investors hold preferred stock, you hold common stock. The preferred stock gives them preferences over you, and one of the preferences is a veto right. The other preference is they get a liquidation preference when it comes to selling the company. So let's say the investor invested $10 million in your company for 20%. You will then have to pay them the $10 million back. Well, basically what happens is a line forms when the funds are being distributed for the sale of the company. The investors are in front of you. They take out their $10 million first, and then they take out an additional liquidation preference as well. Now, liquidation preferences can be 1x, can be anything from 1.5 to 11. I interviewed a startup company that had an investment round financed with a liquidation preference of 11 times. So if the investor invested $10 million, the first $110 million would go to the investor in that scenario. So the answer really here is it depends on the liquidation preference and how much investment was injected in the company. Typically these days investors are at around 1.5 to 2 when it comes to liquidation preferences. So if an investor put in $10 million, they're probably going to take out $15 to $20 million. The first $15 to $20 million goes to them, and then you share pro rata in what's left after that. So you're not going to get $16 million. You're probably going to get closer to 0, but you might get, it really depends on how much money is raised and the liquidation preferences. So how did you do on your 5 questions? If you got all those questions synchronized with my answers, then you probably have experience, you probably know your way around, you know what it takes to build a successful startup and drive it through the stages of development right the way through to an exit. You've figured out how to optimize your tax situation, and you might not need much help at all. That's if you got everything right. If you didn't and you learned something today, then the Milestone Club at Silicon Valley Business School may be able to help you. I'm sorry it's not easier. I mean, there are no get-rich-quick schemes for startup ventures. Starting a company is very, very complicated. You have to get the marketing right, the financing right, the legal aspects right. You're navigating through a minefield, and you really need expert knowledge and a diligent plan, and you need to really know where you're going and how you're going to get there. You need a methodology and a system, and you need to have access to information, but also access maybe to other people that are on the same similar kind of journey to you and your startup. So if you're serious about making a success in your startup venture, joining the Milestone Club could be a big step in the right direction for you. You get access to our extensive knowledge base, webinars and online events, and you get to share your thoughts and ideas with other members, some of whom have extensive experience and are able to help you on your own journey. And the Milestone Club could be your first step into our ecosystem, which includes the Liquidity Club, which is an exclusive global club for, and combined with a next generation investment fund for startups that are really at that point where they've hit their milestones and they are generating really strong momentum, and they are preparing for an exit in the form of merger acquisition, direct listing, secondary sales and secondary markets, and the Liquidity Club has really helped to provide them. But actually, the members of the Liquidity Club have the same access, the same knowledge base that you have here in the Milestone Club. So it all starts here. Once you start hitting milestones and generating momentum, you'll find that doors will open and you will attract the attention of the people you need to make a success of your startup venture. You can join the Silicon Valley Business School Milestone Club today at svbs.co, and I look forward to seeing you there. Thanks very much.